Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.2 support tier list for League of Legends. So, first off, I'm going to talk about some of the considerations, some of the things that have been changed on this patch, some of the meta things, some of the things that I get asked often. So we're just going to talk about Taric going tier versus redemption, the resolve nerfs, zombie ward nerfs, and the ward items really quickly, and then we're just going to move on to the tier list itself. Spend a decent chunk of time talking about the top 10 champions, a little bit faster for the tier 3, and if we have any time left over, I might talk about tier 4 and tier 5. I didn't spend a ton of time organizing the bottom, lower than the top 20. The top 20, I did spend a decent amount of time organizing, and I redid all of the items and all of the rune recommendations for each one of those for this patch. And if you want to know what those are, you can look in the description, find this Google Doc, and then under whichever champion you're interested in, just click on them. So let's say you're interested in Tahm, just click on it. Click on the mini Google Doc. It'll take you to runes that I recommend or recommended items. Now, I will say this is a very dynamic meta, so most champions have multiple items they can build given different situations, and in many cases, multiple runes they could potentially take as well. So, you need to be thinking critically about why you're choosing certain runes, why you're choosing certain items, and not just go for cookie cutter, this is what this person recommends, so I'm just going to build it. You really need to become a better critical thinker. There have been metas in the past where, you would just get the same item every time. Earlier last year, you just rush redemption no matter what on every champion, right? It'd just be redemption lock at every champion every time. But now, it's very dynamic. I think the meta's in a really good place. There are a lot of champions that are viable right now, and build paths and rune paths. So I think they've done an excellent job with diversification and the meta game in general. Okay, I'll also have timestamps in the description, so if you don't want to hear about these new descriptions, you just want to go down and look at the tier list, or maybe you only want to hear about your favorite supports, and maybe you just really love Soraka and you just only want to hear about Soraka, you can just find the timestamp for Soraka in the description, jump straight to it, and listen to that. Okay, let's go ahead and get started, though. Alright, so Taric tier versus Taric redemption. So a lot of pro players have been going tier on Taric. And I explained this on stream yesterday. People were asking, well, why? Why are people doing this? And, one reason is because in pro-level games, or really high-level challenger games, there's just a lot less gold in every game. And so people are going to end games with, maybe tier plus their forward item and maybe one other item, like maybe Locket. Maybe redemption, something like that. Whereas in a solo queue game, especially the lower you go, there's going to be a lot more deaths. So, a pro game, challenger game, the final score might be 10-10. A silver level game, the final score might be 40-40 or something like that. So what that means is when there's that much death going around, everybody's going to have more gold, and it's more important to scale better. And tier doesn't scale into anything. I mean, you can build it into something like a Muramana or an Archangel staff or something if you want, but it's pretty worthless late game. So it's just going to be a dead slot that only gives you mana at some point later in the game. All right, versus if you get something like redemption, that scales extremely well as you get higher levels and as you get more plus healing and shielding. Okay, so because remember, it gets triple the effectiveness of plus healing and shielding. If you read that bottom line there, heal and shield of the main paragraph. Heal and shield power is 3 times as effective on Redemption's heal. So if you get Ardent Sensor, especially if you get Mikhail's, it's going to have a massive impact on how much healing you're doing with Redemption. So Redemption is much better in lower level games where games are going to last longer, there's going to be a lot more death, and there's going to be a lot more scaling because you're going to have more gold to buy more items. Okay, so in pro game, they might think, okay, I just want to spend 750, tie up my mana, I'm not going to have enough gold to complete redemption, and I'd much rather complete my forward item, I have the Equinox, my tier 2 boots, and just buy a bunch of control wards. And that's what you'll see. They just may not have enough gold to complete redemption instead. So that's why I think they do it. It's just kind of out of the state of that particular meta where they're gold starved and they're just not going to have enough money to afford redemption along with the other things that they want, like tier 2 boots and a forward item. Okay. But how does it actually stack up? Is it worth it, even if you're at a lower level, to get tier from a mana standpoint? Because it does look like it's pretty good for your mana, right? Like, it refunds 15% of your mana spent. You get plus 250 mana. You know, I guess the refund itself... So if you get 900, you spend like 300, you're going to get 15 back. And then of that 15 back, you get another 15. I guess it compounds. I hadn't accounted for the compounding of it. Because it's not 15 off, 15%. Because I was thinking of the 15% mana spent going back is basically meaning you have an additional 15% mana, basically. But that refunded mana can also be spent and then refunded again. So if you had like 100 mana, you spent 20, that would take you down to 80. But then you would get 15% of that refunded, so you would get an additional 3 refunded, so that would take it to 83 mana. But then you could spend, of that 83 mana, you would have 3 more to spend, which would also get refunded. So that 3 mana extra that you got there would also get 15% of that refunded whenever you did an additional spell. So when you spam more and more spells, then you're going to get more and more mana. So it compounds. It's not just like a flat 15% extra mana. It compounds every time you spend a spell. So the math here is going to be a little bit off. So if it counted as flat mana at level 9, then you would have 394 effective extra mana. Let's just say it compounds a little bit more and gets you somewhere close to 450 mana as you cast. Redemption at level 9 is going to be 150% of your base mana regen, which is 14 at level 9. If we pull up, I think I have Taric here. So if we pull up the stats for Taric, go to level 9, it's 14 mana regen, 150% of that's 21 mana per 5 that you're gaining off of redemption. So 21 mana per 5 is 252 mana per minute. So I don't know the exact math on the compounding. I'm not going to go through that on this. That's much more complicated math that I would have to do for the tier on Taric at level 9. And there'd be a lot more variables in on it. But just assume this is somewhere between 400 and 500 mana most likely. Either way, if you're out just constantly regenning that 21 mana per 5 as Taric, then it's only going to take 2 minutes. If you're outside of base for 2 minutes, it's going to give you the same mana as tier. Now, that's an unstacked tier. If you stacked tier, a little bit more, then you're going to get more benefit out of it. But the bottom line is, if you're out of lane, for somewhere between 2 to 3 minutes, which is standard, before you have to go get more wards, somewhere between 2 to 3 minutes, this is going to give you basically the same kind of mana regen, right? Redemption and tier, it's going to be very, very similar. The difference is redemption is an actual good item that does things. Like, it has an active, it gives you plus healing and shielding, it gives you CDR, it gives you a lot of things that you want. The stats on redemption are very, very good. And I think that most of the time that's sufficient for Taric's mana supply. A lot of the time. Now, if you're in a fight and you're just spamming all of your spells and that's it, then tier is probably going to be a little bit more efficient because you're not going to have those multiple minutes with Taric. So, tier is going to be better if you're at full mana and then you just try to do as much as you can to burn through all of your mana in a fight. Then tier is probably going to be better. But, the moral of the story here for me is I would favor redemption most of the time, just because in a lot of realistic scenarios where you're doing the Clown Fiesta and you're just kind of running around just passively regenning mana, I think that this is going to give you more mana, and I think that redemption is extremely powerful on Taric. It's extremely powerful on everybody, and the reason is it's very good in team fights and it's also very good in Clown Fiestas, because on someone like Taric, you can't necessarily roam as fast as other champions because you're not going to get mobility boots most of the time. So you're going to be slower than Alistar or Blitz or some of these other champions. But with redemption, then you have 550 range Sphere of Influence. So you have half the map where you can throw that redemption if you're paying attention. And so it gives you a lot of reach, a lot of influence around the map. and it's really good at team fighting, and it scales really well with a lot of the other items that Taric wants to get. So I think that that's good. But if you don't want to go for the plus healing and shielding route with Taric, you just want to go like full tank, you want to go, like lock it into Knight's Vow, into Ninja Tabi, or something like that with Eye of the Equinox, and you just want mana and just forget the plus healing and shielding, then Tyr's a good build. And that's kind of what you see with a lot of people. There are some people who kind of go for that Enchanter route, go for the Redemption. I think Redemption plus Tyr is overkill. You definitely don't need that. If you're going Redemption, then you're also probably going to be going Ardent Censer at some point, which will give you even more plus healing. But then other people want to go Tyr into tank stuff, like this guy. I have the Equinox, Ninja Tabi Tyr. Then it looks like he was going to go... I don't know what that... Righteous Glory? Not sure what that is. But yeah, so I mean, you're seeing like a decent chunk of full tank plus Tyr. There are multiple ways you can do it, but I would still go for Redemption. But both ways are viable. It's just the Tyr, like you're just paying 750 gold for pure mana, nothing else. That's a dead item that doesn't scale into anything. So that's my problem with Tyr. Okay. The Resolve Tree nerfs. There were several Resolve Tree nerfs. So Aftershock got nerfed. That makes those hard engaged tanks in lane a lot weaker. So if you think about like Leona, Shen, those received direct nerfs a couple of patches ago, and now the Aftershock has been nerfed a lot. So they just don't deal nearly as much damage as they did. And that even affects like... Alistar, to an extent, is a lot less dangerous in lane without Aftershock as well. Like, some people are still getting Aftershock on him. It's okay, but you're just not going to have the same kind of early game threat that you used to have. Guardian is also a lot weaker in lane. I mean, going from 45-second cooldown to a 70-second cooldown is massive in lane. So, yeah, you do get a slight bit more scaling later on. But I was playing around with this last night. Like, you're taking a lot more damage in lane a lot of times now that you don't have Guardian coming up as much. So Guardian is still viable on some champions in lane, but it does mean that does give you an incentive to, if you have options to get something other than Guardian or Aftershock, it does make those options a bit more appealing. We'll talk about what some of those are when we go down into the support tier list here in a second. But Guardian is very much a lot weaker, especially in the early game, especially in the laning phase. Aftershock is just complete trash now. It doesn't do any damage. Yeah, you're a little bit tankier early on, but whatever. Like you're not doing nearly as much damage as you did. Now remember, they also changed Guardian plus a lot of other stuff out there. So, Guardian plus Domination or Guardian plus whatever, to where that only gives 65 health and then some other stat, which hurt a lot of these champions too. So if Leona wanted to go Guardian plus Domination, then she's going to get some AP, which is awful on her, instead of getting the full 130 health. And if you go Guardian plus Inspiration, which a lot of people are going now, then you don't get any additional healing off of your pots, which is a big deal. So if you go Inspiration plus Guardian, on the flip side, you get 115 HP, so you get 15 more HP, and you get 20% more healing from potions, which is plus 30 HP on a standard potion, which is about 80 gold worth of health in the laning phase per potion. So you're getting about 240 gold worth of health before you go back for your first buy if you use all 3 potions, which is really, really good. And then that also applies to biscuits that you get, and it also applies to refillable potions. So the Inspiration plus Guardian is really strong. Another thing, if you look at the runes, the second tree and Guardian, so they just nerfed Aftershock or the second tree and Resolve. They just nerfed Aftershock and Guardian, which both of those are significantly less powerful than they were. But then also that second tree is just always really awkward. None of these are that great on support. They just feel really bad. Like, Unflinching is like, it's okay. Demolish is okay, sometimes. Font of Life is okay. Like, this is better. This is good on some champions. Like, on Janna, this is pretty good. Or, like, on, maybe on Taric. Like, anyone who's going to be getting Ardent Censor, like, Font of Life can actually be pretty good. But on, like, Braum or, like, you know, champions like that, it's okay. It's not amazing. So it's not a stellar second tree. The first part of the tree got nerfed pretty hard. But the other two trees are pretty good. Like, Conditioning is pretty good. Like, that's a good bargain. Get 8 bonus armor, 8 bonus magic resist, and then all of your armor and magic resist are increased by 5. So, you know, you're usually going to be getting at least 13 armor and 13 magic resist, which is, let's see, 260. Man, it's going to be at least like a 500 gold value, so that's actually pretty good. And then either Second Wind or Revitalize are both pretty good. Whereas if you look at the Inspiration tree, this thing is just loaded with value. You know, like Cosmic or Magical Footwear is probably the best rune out there. This thing is amazing. And I was saying that right when runes came out, that I thought Magical Footwear was going to be crazy and really good. And I did say also that I thought Inspiration Tree, once people figured it out, would probably be one of the more powerful trees, especially Unsealed Spellbook in competitive. You know, when you go back to my ratings, I said this would probably be a 9 or a 10 out of 10 rune for competitive, and then like a 3 out of 10 for solo queue. And that's kind of what's coming to pass now. So, you know, if you have a champion that can go something like Unsealed Spellbook, Biscuit Delivery is amazing, Perfect Timing is really good if you use it correctly, Magical Footwear, and then Cosmic Insight is a fantastic bargain as well. You know, if you think that Summoner Spell and Active Item is worth about as much as normal cooldown reduction, which is debatable because there is no comparable stat, then that's like a 400 gold value key or rune there. So this is just a really, really good value, especially after they've nerfed the Resolve tree so much. Like, they nerfed both of these, and they basically nerfed it if you try to combine it with Sorcery or Domination. Like, you're going to have a lot less health, which is something that tanks do not want to have to sacrifice. So it does, yeah, it does diversify your, you know, stats a little bit more. Like, you get health plus AP or health plus AD, but tanks don't want AP or AD most of the time. They just want a lot of health. So that's kind of a feels bad. And they've nerfed all the other trees. I mean, they've nerfed a lot of this stuff, even though a lot of supports don't get that. Like, they nerfed Coup de Grace several times. They've nerfed Triumph. Nerfing things like Coup de Grace have hurt champions like Zyra and like other damage supports that want to burst people for all in, and Triumph is also hurt with that. And then nerfs to Zombie Ward really hurt that Zombie Ward Ingenious Hunter build that I was going for. I think that build is probably done. Like, I tried it last night. Like, Ingenious Hunter is still good, but Zombie Ward just feels really bad early on. It just doesn't last. Like, it still does give you some vision, but it's really hard to pass up, like, these boots. They're so good. So, you know, you don't get enough vision early on. Like, this helped you be so safe early on because your trinket wards were turned into 4-minute wards if people didn't clear them, and that was so awesome for vision before you had a sight stone. So that was like fantastic for the first, you know, 5 to 7 minutes of the game, depending on your back timing. But now it's much less. It's 50% less time. It's only 1 minute plus 1 minute, so it's, you know, 2 minutes instead of 4 minutes. So it does provide some extra coverage. I just don't think it's worth sacrificing the boots anymore most of the time. And the active item CDR is nice, but that does take time to ramp up as well. It's not something in the early game that matters. In the early game, it's becoming more important because we're shifting out of that relic meta bottom. Like, you're still going to have a lot of tank supports that have relic meta, but harassment's going to be more important now because the 80 carry is not going to be taking Targons anymore. So you're probably still going to see some fleet footwork. So it's not going to be like a super hyper aggressive early game meta, but it is shifting a little bit out of just farm all the time meta bot lane where you can actually do some trades and fight. So, you know, having something that's more relevant early on rather than Ingenious Hunter is useful. So having things like Biscuit Delivery, for example, so that you can fight more often and have better sustain in lane, is probably going to be a little bit better than Ingenious, which takes a while to stack up. Like, that really doesn't start coming online until like 20 minutes in team fights where you start getting all those stacks. And when you start getting your Sweeper at level 9 and your Redemption and your Locket and stuff like that. So it is still really powerful, but I think that a lot of the changes on this patch have made it a bit more appealing to want to go Inspiration, most notably the Zombie Ward change. So I think Inspiration is really good right now. I think if you can run Inspiration, you should run Inspiration. It has a lot of really great stuff, either as your main tree or your primary tree. I feel like a lot of the supports are going to run Resolve and Inspiration. It just depends on the order, whether it's going to be Inspiration primary or Resolve primary. And a lot of that's going to depend on how well the support uses Unsealed Spellbook. Like, you can still try to use Klepto, but they've nerfed Klepto, ranged Klepto a lot right now. So, I mean, you can try things like, you know, Klepto Nami or Klepto Sona, I guess, but it's probably not worth it. It's probably not worth it. So Unsealed's very powerful for macro plays. You can take, on champions like Alistar, you can take Teleport and like teleport to top lane and get it on ganks, or you can try to go gank mid lane and they try to engage on your 80 carry bot lane. You can teleport back to bot lane and turn it around. So like the ability to be like use something like a teleport, or I mean you could even go cheese if you want to. You know, if you have like a Draven in your lane, you could go for like Ignite Exhaust or something and just all in somebody at level 2. Or you can just go standard Ignite Flash and just have 25% cooldown on your summoners so that you have more Ignites, more Flashes. You can play a lot more aggressively. So all of these are like pretty reasonable options. And Stopwatch has become so powerful because if you use it correctly to deny a kill, that denies 600 gold to the enemy, and you can sell it for 120 gold. And so, because a kill is worth, well, 450 gold. A kill is worth about 300 gold if it's not a shutdown, and then there's an assist on top of that for half value a lot of the time. So you're shutting down, you're denying 450 gold, and then you can sell it for 120 gold. So that's effectively like a 570 gold item if you use it correctly. So that's a really good bargain also. I mean, most supports don't combine it into anything. But having Stopwatch is potentially good if you use it correctly. And then, you know, this kind of shift in meta helps out roaming supports like Rakan and Alistar. If you have really good macro and you can roam around with Unsealed Spellbook, that's a really powerful option out there. Okay, so the Zombie Ward nerfs, as I said, I think a lot of supports should go Inspiration now. Ingenious Hunter's still great. Inspiration's too strong. As far as the ward items go, it's a great buff for supports. You get 800 free gold in your pocket. I know a lot of people were kind of like reluctant about it. Is it going to be good? Is it not going to be good? Overall, it's going to make it easier for you to have a larger influence on the game compared to other roles. You need to think of it that way. Because it's not the only way that champions have influence on the game is gold, but gold is a very powerful tool to help you have more influence into the game. You know, obviously, if you have more gold, you can get better items. If you have better items, you're going to have more contributions to team fights. You're just going to have more power. And so, basically, like, spotting supports an extra 800 gold in the early game is really powerful. It's like giving you, like, 2.5 kills worth of gold. So, it's almost like you get a triple kill right when you go into the loading screen. So, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for supports. Like, the thing I was worried about was that other lanes were going to abuse support items, and I haven't really seen a lot of that. Because they got rid of Frost Queens, and they got rid of Talisman, and they got rid of Targon giving you a shield. So all of those were the things that were being abused beforehand, but now they're, you know, they don't exist anymore, so people aren't abusing them. So I think they're doing a pretty good job of balancing it so far. I don't think it really shook up, like, which supports are more viable than others. I do think that the tank one is the most valuable one, especially at a 3-ward slot. And I talked about this. Let Last night, I think it was on stream, or maybe it was in one of the recent... No, it was in my patch notes video that I released yesterday. I think I talked about this. And I'm going to have a full vision guide here soon. I was sick for like 3 days, a couple of days ago, and I'm still trying to, you know, catch up as much as I can. I have a whole lot of guides and coaching sessions and things that people have commissioned. I'm trying to get through those. But yeah, here's some of the notes I've been working on for the vision video in terms of the valuation of the new gold items. So Frost Fang at tier 2 is about 112% gold efficient. In an ideal situation, ideal circumstances, you can get about 90 gold per minute. With Targon, it's 72% gold efficient at tier 2 and 80 gold per minute. And with Nomads, it's 49%, 80 gold per minute efficiency. Now, the Nomads is a lot more reliable in terms of getting your gold and getting more gold perhaps than others. And that's the hardest to calculate, like what you can expect, because it's just kind of random when the coins drop. Targon's is really reliable as well for the most part. And then Frostfang is the least reliable one. Sometimes, especially in tough lanes, you just can't harass enough to trigger the Frostfang on cooldown. But once we switch over and go to tier 3, the numbers switch around a little bit. So Eye of the Watchers actually becomes less efficient. It goes from 112% to 100%. Eye of the Equinox actually becomes much, much more efficient at 116% from 72%. And you get an additional charge, so you have a potential to get more income. You have more flexibility in how often you have to proc those charges without losing efficiency. And then Eye of the Oasis is only 78% efficient. So it gets better, but it's still bad in terms of efficiency. Most people aren't going to use Oasis. I still like to use it on Janna early on, although a lot of people will get Watchers. I've used it on Rakan too, but I'm thinking about a different build on Rakan that I've been looking up lately that I might try. Where Watcher would be better. But basically this means that Eye of the Equinox is the best one. If you're going for a 3-ward item, Eye of the Equinox is by far the most efficient one that you're going to get. And it also gives you consistent gold throughout the game. Once the laning phase breaks, you're not going to be able to trigger Watcher on cooldown most of the time because you're going to have to go hit enemies for that. And a lot of times it's really dangerous to do. Oasis, you're still going to get your coins if you're near a wave. And Equinox, you're still going to get your charges if you're last hitting properly on minion waves. So Eye of the Equinox is both the most efficient, it offers the best stat line, and it's one of the easiest to get your gold value out of it at the end. So that just reinforces that tanks are still going to be very strong. So yeah, I mean, nothing really changed in the meta that much off of this. Just people are itemizing a little bit different. They're getting runes a little bit differently. And tank itemization is still fine. If you just look at like most tanks, they're just going to rush Eye of the Equinox, tier 2 boots, Locket, Knight's Vow. No problem. Game's over before then. Like, yeah, your 5th item is a little worse than it used to be. But most games, you're not going to get to the 5th item. You know, you're going to have 4 items and your control wards, and that's going to be it. If you do get to a 5th item, you can still go something like a Zeke's Convergence or a Righteous Glory or something like that. But I think a lot of tanks are still fine, you know, just going, like I said, tier 2 boots, Equinox, Knight's Vow, Locket. And that's still really strong. I think AP supports are still really hurt. And I think that the problem with AP supports is they nerf sorcery so much that you just can't put out enough damage early to cut through the tank's healing. Because when tanks have second wind from the resolve tree, they start off with an extra 130 health, they get healing off of Targons, and they get biscuits from the biscuit delivery system in Inspiration, then it just makes it virtually impossible to poke them out of lane. And now they're going to have a free extra 800 gold. So yeah, you can, you know, get to your Haunting guys plus Sork shoes faster, but they're also going to be getting to their Locket faster. And so, and they're going to be getting, you know, that tier 3 gold item. When you upgrade that early, that gives you a ton of health regen in lane. So that falls off later. They're calling it like Remnant of the Equinox. Okay. I mean, yeah, the health regen falls off later, but early on, 200% health regen is pretty bonkers. If we look at something like Braum, who's like super powerful right now. You look at someone like Braum and his like health regen at level 9. He has 14.9 health regen per 5. You're getting an extra 200% of that. So you're getting 30 health per 5. Extra. So, means you're getting 360 health per minute. Healing. So yeah, that's, I mean, and in addition to your base just being really high, so you're going to get an extra half of that. You're going to get an extra 180. I mean, that's 550 extra HP per minute. So how do you harass through that? Like, how do you harass somebody who's getting free biscuits, who's getting second wind, which is going to give him an extra, you know, couple of reju beads worth of regeneration, which reju bead, I believe, is 50% regen. It's just, you know, it's going to take this number up to like 700 health per minute or something, at least. I mean, how do you harass through that as Zyra? Especially as someone who is going to, like, they're going to get a null magic mantle early. Like, how do you kill him? Like, not even including things like his shield or Alistar's roar for healing in lane, or Alistar's ability to ult, or like Tahm Kench's Grayskin, or you know, all of these other like just natural heals and shields that champions are going to have in lane. Taric's ability to just, you know, heal himself and everyone around him for 100 health every like half a second after he double auto attacks, in addition to his shield, in addition to being able to ult, make everyone invulnerable for 2.5 seconds. You can't poke people anymore in lane as a like a Zyra or a Braum, like, or a Brand. I mean, you can try to poke him, you can try to all in, but there's just too much regeneration in the system right now, and it's still really difficult. Like, you can stick a little bit more onto tanks now because they're not going to have Relic Shield, but it's still going to be on the tough side. And you're not going to be poking out these tanky supports, especially when they rush, when they're all rushing out of the Equinox, because they're getting the extra 200% health regen in lane. So, yeah, so I think that I thought that the extra gold would help out some of these sorcery supports, but I just don't think that's the case. After, you know, playing a lot yesterday, I had to stream for like 8 hours yesterday, and also, you know, just analyzing some of these numbers. It's just not happening. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the tier list itself. So now that we talked about kind of the preamble, what's changed, how does this apply to the different supports, and what can you expect to see? What can you, what will be strong on this patch? Okay. I think top of the roost is still Taric for me in solo queue. The reason is, he is the only one who is very tanky and also can scale like an enchanter with enchanter items. And that puts him in a very good position here, because he can outscale other tanks like Tahm Kench and Braum, but at the same time, he still gets Relic Shield, and he's still very hard to kill, and he has really good team fighting. So, a lot of this is his the interaction with his heal. So, every time, and this is something I had to learn after playing Taric a lot and watching some other people play Taric, is that you really have to chain together your auto attacks with your Q in team fights, and that's how you get just massive presence. So you want to get 2 points in Starlight's Touch. You don't want to get more than that. I have a Season 8 Taric guide on the channel if you want to check out that guide for more detail. But basically, this ends up giving you 2 charges. And keep in mind that this does not scale at all with like how many points you have in it. It's the same thing. It's still 30, flat 30, 20% of your AP, 1% of max health per charge stored. Okay, at the time of the cast. The only difference is you can store more charges. So if you are just Q, auto, auto, and every time you auto, it gives you 1 extra charge of Starlight's Touch. Just says right here. Grants 1 charge of Starlight's Touch. Okay, so the combo is Q, auto, auto, Q, auto, auto, Q, and that keeps your passive going the whole time, and that constantly allows you to spam this Q. Now, the mana cost does go up, though, so if you level this up to level 5, even if you're only using 2 charges, it's still going to cost you the entire 110 mana. So that's why you only want to keep it at 2 charges, so that you're getting maximum efficiency out of it. Because then you're using 2 charges every time, and you're keeping it at a low mana cost of 80. And so that's going to give you 60 flat and then 2% of your max health. So if you have, 1,000 health, that's going to be 20. So that'd be 80. If you have 2,000 max health, that's going to be 40. So that'd be 100. So, I'm thinking like in the mid game, you're probably going to be healing for about 100. In the early game, you're probably going to be healing for about 80. So somewhere between 80 to 100 every time you cast this. But don't forget, that's not just on you. That's on you, the person that you have your W on, and everyone that's around that person. So a lot of times, if you're positioning this correctly, you can heal 3 people with this. So you can put it on the tank, who's sort of, in the mix. It'll always heal you, and then it'll heal like usually one other person around that tank, or one other person. Like if you're near 80 carry, it'll also heal your 80 carry. Or if you're like sieging a tower, you can Q, auto, auto, Q, auto, auto, Q, and just position where you're healing 3 or 4 people. So, if you're healing 3 people, that's 80 mana for a 300 heal, which is a lot. That's a very, very big heal, if you think about it that way, right? So, like a Janna's shield is only for 210. Now, it does have AP scaling on it, and it does benefit from plus healing and shielding, although Taric's, this benefits from plus healing and shielding too. So if you rush Redemption on Taric, you're going to be getting an extra 10% of that. So instead of a 300 heal, it's going to be a 330. But that's really what's making him so strong, is that in team fights, and this has a 1 second cooldown basically. Even in a 2-on-2 bot lane, that's still a 200 heal on a 1 second cooldown. So early on, when you're trading with somebody, in these all-in fights. And that gives you a pretty good amount of damage. I mean, it gives you, if you're level 3, 33 on-hit damage and 15% of your bonus armor as magic damage. So, you're hitting for like an extra 40. So you can just do that. You just auto, Q, auto, Q when you're all-in trading with somebody. And it makes it really hard to kill you and your 80 carry. And you put out quite a surprising amount of damage early on. And then you end up maxing points in your stun, which lowers the cooldown and does a lot of damage. I mean, it's 285 damage plus 30% of your bonus armor. So if you have 100 bonus armor, it's going to be over 300 damage. And a 1.25 stun is really nice. Now, yes, they can dodge it. It is a 1 second delay, but you can also surprise people quite a lot if you flash stun them. So you get this dazzle going, and they think they're safe. They, reposition out of it. Then you flash just slightly to the side and get them with it. That can be a really strong all-in that catches people off guard. And then Bastion, of course, gives you extra armor and gives your partner extra armor. So he just has a lot of nice buffs. He has really good teamfight presence and healing with Starlight's Touch. And, of course, his ultimate makes everyone invulnerable for like 2.5 seconds. So if it's going to be a long team fight, or not, if you just have enough time to wind up for this, then it's super powerful. And as soon as your team engages, just go ahead and pop Cosmic Radiance. Like, you don't want to wait until people are actually low. You want to do it when they engage so that it's blocking the maximum amount of health, and also just so that someone's not going to die before you get it off. So yeah, I think all of this positions Taric very well. So he has really good itemization too. We'll talk about when we click on the runes here. He gets to go Ninja Tabi, which are, really good boots. I have the Equinox, and then he can do Redemption Locket, which is what I like to do. Although you can also go for, Knight's Vow if you want instead. Ardent Censer is also on the table. If you have a really fed 80 carry, you can proc Ardent Censer very easily. Or if you have like 3 auto attackers on your team, if you have like a Gnar top, a Master Yi in the jungle, and, a Kog'Maw ADC, and then if you get Redemption, it could potentially buff up all 3 of them. That would be a situation where Font of Life's pretty good. Because if you stun someone and then, you know, everyone on your team hits them, then they get the buff from Ardent Censer through the Font of Life healing. But because you can constantly, like, spam out your Qs, and it's an area of effect that hits a lot of different people, then you can get the Ardent Censer on a lot of people, even if you don't have Font of Life. So there's a couple of different builds that are good on him. You can go Guardian, which is still... This used to be the de facto build. It's still pretty good. You know, later on in the game and team fights, it does provide a little bit of an extra shield. You don't have much control over whenever that happens, so sometimes this will trigger off of just someone's auto attack or like a really small amount of harass. You know, like maybe Volkaz hits somebody with a Q or something while they're sieging, and it procs your Guardian. So, you know, it's still good. It's still good. Font of Life is decent on him. You know, you are going to be stacking a lot of health, so it will give your team more healing. Conditioning's a really good bargain, as I described before. It's about 500 health worth of value. Revitalize improves your healing a lot. If it's a tough lane, you can also go Second Wind, and then you would go Magical Footwear Biscuit, or you can go Unsealed Spellbook, Biscuit, Footwear, Cosmic Insight, and then get Conditioning and Revitalize. So the core differences here are you're going to have Conditioning, Revitalize, Footwear, and Biscuit no matter what. You just have to decide, okay, do I want Guardian and Font of Life, or would I rather have Unsealed Spellbook and Cosmic Insight? It's a tough call. You know, if you have Unsealed Spellbook plus Cosmic Insight, you have 30% cooldown on your summoners, which is huge. And like I said, the flash stun is almost always a kill, because very few people see that coming. Like, you start charging your E, they think they've dodged it, they're out of the way, and then you flash stun them. I had a, you know, in a game yesterday, there were like 3 different times where I ended up flash stunning like 3 people to start a team fight. Like, I've flash stunned 3 people. You start stunning, like you start charging it up. It has a 1-second charge time, so you press your E first. How you do it, you aim in a certain direction, you can see where it's going, and then after like half a second, then you flash onto him, like right when it's about to go off. And then Kennen went in and just like blew them all up. So it gives you more plays like that. It also allows you the ability to teleport around the map to make macro plays to get behind people or to get to situations. Like if everybody's about to contest Baron, but you were really low and the enemy thought they chunked you out and they start doing Baron, then you just can switch over to teleport really quickly and teleport back to your team. That can be very powerful. Or, you know, if you don't want to give up map pressure, like you just ran out of wards and everyone's jockeying for position around Baron, but you really need more wards, or you have a completed locket or something and your team's positioning around Dragon and you need to go back and get it, but, you know, because it would be really big for the team fight, but you don't want to give up your positioning, you can just let them know that you're going to get teleport, you go back, teleport back down. So there's a lot of different utility that you can have with Unsealed Spellbook. You are going to lose a little bit of pressure when your summoners are down. So it's up to you. Font of Life and Cosmic are both pretty good. It just depends on sort of what you're building. If you're going to get Ardent Censer, I would say Font of Life is better. If you're not going to get Ardent Censer, Cosmic is potentially better. Both of those are about similar. So it really comes down to, do you just want Unsealed Spellbook for better macro pressure, or do you want Guardian for a little bit of better all-in potential? Now, Guardian is very good against champions like all-in assassins like Zed or something like that. They're just going to try to all-in your AD carry. Giving them that extra Guardian shield can definitely be the difference between life and death. So it is worthwhile considering if they have assassins on their team. Okay. So Taric, awesome. He's probably the best blind pick right now. There's not really like a super bad champ that counters him really hard. Janna's another champ. Classic. I talk about Janna all the time. She's just virtually always going to be good. She has a great kit. She has really good peel with her Tornado and her R. She has excellent scaling with her Tornado and her shield. Her shield has been nerfed. Her Tornado speed got slowed down. You know, the cooldown is up a lot on her shield in addition to the raw shield number going down. So she's been nerfed a lot, but she's coming back into vogue because she just outscales Tahm, Kench, and Braum. And both of those are very popular right now. So, especially Braum. and she just crushes Braum in many ways because she just outscales him. And if you put that shield on a hyper carry, like a Jinx or something like that, then they can definitely take off, especially if you combine it with something like an Ardent Sensor, which is an item that Tahm and Braum can't build. So I think that Janna is in a really good position. She's very strong. She is vulnerable early game, so if you are against her ass because you're not going to be getting... Like, you can go second wind on Janna. I actually thought of a build like, Guardian, Font of Life, Conditioning, and Revitalize on Janna. I think would be pretty good. Pretty much everybody goes Airy, which is good for harassment early, but if you're against kind of a tough lane... Excuse me. If you're against like a Zyra or something like that in lane... I think you could go Guardian Inspiration and get like Second Wind, Biscuit, Guardian, Font of Life, and like Mirror Shield and probably be okay. But in general, I recommend kind of the standard runes, just Airy, Mana Flow, Celerity, Scorch, and then Biscuit, Magical Footwear. Now, some people will max W on Janna. I really don't like that. You know, if you're against a tank and you want to go Eye of the Watchers, I suppose you will get more harassment. If you want to go W, I would go 3 points max in lane. Because I don't see much benefit of getting more points in W when your lane's broken and you're roaming around, like, trying to position for Dragon. I think leaving your shield at 20 seconds and having it, give such a low amount of damage mitigation is going to be disadvantageous for you. So... and different pro players do different things with this. They aren't all in agreement. Some people do max the W. Some people still max the shield. Statistically, Janna and Rakan are also the top. I don't always pay attention to stats in terms of, like, the top statistical champions are always the best. But... They do both happen to be up there as well. So if you look at kind of the pro builds itemization, pretty much everybody goes Airy plus Inspiration. In some tough matchups, like perks, you might see people go for Second Wind and Mirror Shield, or I guess he went Revitalize Mirror Shield. I really don't like going Gathering Storm. I mean, it is good on Janna, but you're giving up a lot of early game. I guess Scorch got nerfed and is pretty bad, so maybe you can afford to go Gathering Storm, but trying to see. Yeah, like Mithy likes to go Eye of the Storm. So he got 2 points in Zephyr. He got him kind of in a weird order. I assume he most likely had some lane pressure, like maybe they won a really good trade around level 4, and then his 5th level, he's like, okay, we just won that trade, I want to put more pressure on, so I'm going to, get another point here. And against Braum, you can pressure him out a lot in early. Braum is not amazing in lane. He's much better at team fighting. So yeah, now he did go Frostfang. Almost all of them are going to go Eye of the Watchers. Nobody likes going Oasis. I still like Oasis on Janna, but I understand if you can proc Frostfang enough in lane, if you trust that your ally is not going to be a complete turkey and is going to allow you enough lane pressure where you can get some auto attacks in there. Because you can't just walk up by yourself if your AD carry is just AFK, only last hitting. You can't just walk up and auto attack like Zyra, Draven, or something bot lane, So sometimes you just can't get those procs in. Yeah, this person also goes for Eye of the Oasis. So I think a lot of people are still getting Eye of the Oasis. There are a couple of goofballs that do max W. See, he goes 3 points and then transitions over to the E. So it's debatable. Basically, if you get more points in your W, you do have more lane harassment. But you're going to have a significantly weaker mid-game when you're trying to contest, other towers, dragons, rotations, and things like that. Because your shield is going to have a much longer cooldown. It's going to be a 20-second cooldown. at level 1 still, and it's just not going to give you very much mitigation. And your W, it's like, yeah, you can W, but you shouldn't be walking up and starting fights with a W or something as Janna, you know? So I think the usefulness of maxing W really falls off outside the laning phase. Elimination strikes me as a max W kind of guy. Yeah. I don't know. There are different ways you can do it, but I personally recommend if you want to get more points in W, don't do more than 3 in the laning phase. And I would say really just stop at 2 and then start maxing your shield, because you really want that shield to be ready to go for the mid game. I just feel like it's taking Janna and turning her into something that she's not. You know, like if you want that kind of thing, if you want a lot of harassment and you want like a damage support that also scales pretty well into late game, like you need to be playing Lulu. Lulu is just way better at that in the laning phase. Okay, Tahm Kench is another one. I've talked about Tahm quite a lot on the channel. He was my most played champion in Season 6 when I got to Diamond. He's very, very good, but he's deceptively hard to play. Like, people think, you know, that you just walk up and W people and just save your allies, and that's it. He's just like this mindless champion. Yeah, 1 difficulty score. But he's deceptively pretty difficult to play, and the reason is there are a lot of choices with him. So he's not mechanically hard to play, but there are a lot of choices, and if you play him wrong, you're going to be bad, and you may not only be bad, like, you may actively, like, really hurt your team if you do it wrong. So if your AD carry is about to kill the enemy AD carry, for example, and you eat them because you think they're going to die, and then you spit them out and the AD carry gets away, or the AD carry's cooldown just came up and they kill them, that could be really bad. Or maybe they're ignited and they're going to die anyways, and you eat them thinking you can save them, and they die in your mouth instead of getting off that 1 auto attack to trade kills, and now they just gave a kill to the enemy without receiving anything back. So there's a lot of ways you can mess up Kench. And you also have the choice, like, yeah, you can eat to save your allies, but you can also eat enemies. And so sometimes if like a bruiser's running at your AD carry, sometimes it's tough to tell, well, should I eat my AD carry to, you know, try to run them to safety, or should I eat the bruiser to peel them off of the AD carry? Because with some bruisers, if you eat your AD carry, then they're just going to run them down and kill them after you spit them out. Whereas if you eat the enemy, then it's actually going to do a huge chunk of damage to them, and you can pull the enemy off of them. So you can eat the enemy and then walk them away from your AD carry. So some of these decisions aren't always like really easy. So you have to manage your W cooldown really well. And there are combos with your Tongue Lash too that can be tricky. So, you know, a standard combo is, you know, auto attack, Tongue Lash, auto attack, eat. But sometimes you may have to decide, well, once again, if like there's a bruiser diving your AD carry, do I try to auto attack them 3 times so that I can get the 1.5 second stun with my Q? Or do I need to go ahead and Q them so that, you know, they're slowed down enough, even though, you know, I'm not going to be able to get the Q stun anymore. Because like the big, you know, the dream CC chain is you auto attack somebody 3 times, you Q them to stun them for 1.5 seconds, and then you auto attack them, or then you eat them after that to stun them for basically an additional, you know, 1.5 seconds. So it's tricky. And then the gray skin is also relatively tricky to use. Like when you use your gray skin to get the maximum health, and when do you just let it ride so that you get the health regeneration. And then of course his ultimate, like, is kind of difficult too. It's basically like a TF ultimate. It's like a semi-global teleport where you can take your allies with you. It's like, should you ultimate behind the enemy to try to make a flank? Should you just ultimate to get together with your team? Because sometimes if you ult to go for that flank, then all of a sudden there are more enemies there than you realize because you didn't have good vision, and you get yourself and your ally killed. So he is somewhat challenging to use, even though it looks like sometimes he's mindless. Just because there are a lot of considerations that go through. And you can see in his win percentage, he's never going to be much higher than 50%. Just because he's kind of hard to play. He's kind of like Thresh. Thresh is never going to be much higher than 50% win rate under most circumstances. If he is, that means he's really overpowered in that meta. But like Thresh, Rakan, Tahm, all of these are relatively like tricky champions to use. Okay, so I do think that Tahm is very good right now. And The reason is he has very good itemization, kind of like Taric. Now, there are some interesting rune options on Tahm. And Tahm hard counters engage, so if someone has a Thresh or Alistar or Rakan or Varus, Ashe, Malzahar, Leona, Vi, Nautilus, Lissandra, just anything that's like really reliant on crowd control, just Tahm Kench is very good against that. And he has good macro pressure. So that's why I think that Kench is pretty strong right now. One of the main reasons. Now, one of the builds that I saw that was really cool here, who was it? I think it was Gorilla. His Kench game is he's getting Glacial Augment. So this is something that just got buffed on this patch for melee champions. So now it slows people by a lot more than it used to. Let me see here. So it's a 45% slow that increases to 55% slow over 2 seconds. So that is going to allow you to go in and get more auto attacks on people. So, and it's a per target cooldown, not a per auto cooldown. So you can slow a lot of people in team fights with Tahm Kench. Once they're slowed, you're going to get more auto attacks, and you're eventually going to be able to eat them. And you just have better CC and better peel. So I think it's pretty good. Guardian's not amazing on Tahm. It's okay, but you don't have anything that targets your allies, so you have to be standing right next to them to trigger Guardian, other than eating them. So I think it's interesting. Like, Glacial does give you a lot more aggression and a lot more kill threat in lane. So you can go Glacial, Biscuit, Footwear, Approach Velocity is actually something that you don't see on anyone hardly, but it's actually pretty good on Tahm Kench. If you have slowed somebody, you get 10% bonus movement speed. So if you Q somebody, it gives you that 10% movement speed to get up close to them, auto them, put the Glacial Augment on them, and then auto attack them one more time. So even if they flash at that point, you're probably going to kill them because they're going to be slowed by that much. Because if you Tongue Lash and auto eat somebody in lane, they're dead. Like, almost always they're dead. So that's a really interesting interaction there. Then you can also go Second Wind plus Conditioning, which is pretty nice. As far as the runes, you can still also go just your standard Guardian, Font of Life, Conditioning, Second Wind, and then Biscuit and Footwear if you want to. Now, like I said, Guardian is a little iffy because you don't have anything that targets your allies other than your W. So you can proc it, but it's harder to proc it. And then Font of Life, once again, is okay, but you're not going to be... you're not going to be running Ardent Sensor. You do have a slow, so that is nice when you stack a lot of health. So it's okay. It's okay, but I think Approach Velocity, like, this is just a much more aggressive, like, kill lane kind of build, which is pretty cool. I mean, Glacial is nice for peeling people off later on in the game, too. Yeah, it's an interesting build, and I think he's a pretty good champ right now. He does have a hard time against someone like a Janna or a Taric if the enemy has a better AD carry. Like, a lot of these top champions are all peelers, shielders, supports, and so a lot of it's just going to come down to who has the better AD carry. So if you have Jinx plus any one of these champions, then you're going to absolutely massacre somebody who has Jhin plus any of these champions. So, you know, those champions are all awesome, but you have to have a hyper carry, AD carry. If you do not, if you have an Ezreal or you have a Jhin or a Misfortune or something like that, you're going to have a hard time. Because none of them have very reliable engage. Braum is another one who's really popular right now. He's a good peeler, shielder. He's a great relic shield user. Getting that stun off can be a really big deal in team fights. So he's very good with Jinx. Because if you tag multiple people, I'm pretty sure that the AoE on Hurricane would trigger procs on everybody. I'm not 100% about that if you start the procs on him. I'm not sure why he's coming so much into popularity. I think it's because he's pretty good against Kench. Yeah, I mean, he's just a really good, solid team fight AD carry. Now, his E is pretty good against other auto attack hyper carries. So, you know, very, very good against Twitch and Xayah because they both do area of effect, like AoE attacks that do a ton of damage, and so he blocks all of that. He blocks all of the twitch shots. It doesn't go through his shield at all. He blocks all of the like feathers when Zyra tries to throw feathers through people to stick them all behind your team. He blocks all of that. He blocks Ezreal ults. That's another reason why he's pretty popular in pro play right now, is because Ezreal's very popular and he's very good into Ezreal. He's very good into Nami. I know Nami, I get asked about her all the time. In solo queues, she's becoming pretty popular. Braum is extremely good into Nami because he blocks her wave. Another reason in pro play you're seeing him a ton, like 8.1, is he's really good against Ornn. So, like, an Ornn ult can completely wreck your team, but Braum can block the entire Ornn ult and soak it himself. So, he has some pretty favorable interactions with a lot of champions. I think he has a hard time against Taric in team fights. I think Taric is just going to out-sustain him with his ult and just the spam, like the auto-attack Q spam. But he is pretty good. His problem is he just doesn't have any plus healing and shielding. He doesn't have a lot of macro pressure like Tahm Kench. But he is still really strong. So, some people might have him slightly higher than this. I think he does deserve to be on tier 1 right now, just because of some of the nerfs to the other champs and just how the meta sort of shaking out right now. But I do think that overall he's in a really strong position. So, just Guardian, Font of Life, Conditioning, Second Wind, Biscuit, Footwear. You could try the Unsealed Spellbook on him. I mean, I guess, like, Flash ulting can be useful with him. But I'd probably just go with just the Guardian, Font of Life, Conditioning, Second Wind, all that stuff. So, and then just Ninja, Equinox, Locket, Knight's Vow, Zeke's. Okay, so these champions are pretty good into almost anything. You can probably blind pick and be alright with these, especially Taric and Janna. Rakan is really good right now. I still like Rakan. I think Rakan is the best engaged champion. The problem is Rakan has really hard matchups into Taric, Janna, Tahm Kench, and Braum. Right? So all of them have really good CC, and, well, Tahm Kench doesn't have great CC. But they make it difficult to pick people off. And Rakan did get a little hurt because he wasn't... I liked him as an Eye of the Oasis user last patch, because it's really hard to proc the Spell Thief procs unless you get multiple points in Q and lane, which is what a lot of people are kind of moving towards with Rakan, which I might try out getting like 2 or 3 points in Q and lane. It does slow down your cooldowns in the mid game, but it does allow you to harass more to make good use of Eye of the Watchers, or whatever it's called, Remnant of the Watchers now. I assume that's just kind of a troll build at the end. Remnant of the Watchers, but it's the same thing as Janna W. I don't really see the merit of maxing this outside of lane. You're not really a poke champion. You're really hurting your shielding and all in the early game. But I think that getting like 2 or 3 points in lane is decent. It does lower the cooldown quite a lot. Let me pull it up here. So it does lower the cooldown in lane. It takes it from 12 seconds to 9 seconds. And it does do a little, a significant amount more damage, 160 damage. It does allow you to, like, do something with your mana that's helpful in lane. Because sometimes, like, Rakan doesn't have super great harass without blowing through all of his mana. Like, you can W in and then, like, E back out. But, like, W in, knock him up, Q, and then E back out. But that takes, like, all of your mana to do that a lot of times. But this would give you a bit more poke, and that also does give you more sustain in lane as well, which means you can be more aggressive and try to go for like more auto attacks on tanks. So you can auto attack them, Gleaming Quill them, and try to get more off of your Spell Thieves. And it does scale pretty well with AP. Like you get a 1.6 ratio on your shield, and then you get a 0.9 on this shield. And the more you auto attack in Q, the more you get this as well, your passive shield. So I think maybe going 2 or 3 points in Q and lane could be useful. A lot of them have stopped maxing their W. This is what people used to get. It does lower the cooldown. It does increase the damage, which is good. This actually has the exact same damage profile as Gleaming Quill, just on a longer cooldown. But this is going to hurt your mobility around the map. I mean, one of the cool things about Rakan that I like when you max W is you can just jump over walls and just rotate really quickly to get to situations. So this will slow that down a little bit. But in exchange, it will give him a better laning phase. And his laning phase is pretty rough. Because you will be able to spam these Qs more. The thing is, when you level up, or when you put more points in Q here, it doesn't affect how much you're healing at all. It only affects the damage. So, and like, the range is 900. It doesn't really have an effect radius. Like, it's just whatever unit it hits. It has no AoE. And it feels like a lot shorter than 900. But anyways, Rakan, I think he's one of the best engaged champs because once again, kind of like Taric, he scales like an enchanter. So you can get Redemption, Lock It, and just outscale some of his other champions like Braum and Tahm. Although they do make it very difficult to engage onto them and start team fights. So, you know, he's okay. He's very good at roaming. I prefer him to Alistar because he has that shielding. Alistar is tankier. Alistar does deal better with CC. Rakan has a really hard time with CC. So if it's like, if he's going into a Malzahar or he's going into like a Thresh or something like that, it's going to be pretty rough. So Alistar is going to be better into those kind of matchups. But Rakan has the best shield of any major enchanter out there. You know, because he can get a 300 shield every time. Because you get 2 casts of this with a 1.6 ratio, which is just insane scaling, AP-wise. So, he's still really good. He's valuable, especially at top-end players. He's like 54%. With Zyra, obviously, he's really good, but he's still pretty good with other champions as well. And yeah, a lot of people are going this unsealed spellbook build. So I've got it written out here for you. So the thought process here is Flash is very good on him because he can flash ult people, but then he can also teleport behind people, kind of like Alistar, the next person we're going to look at, and make plays. You can teleport behind people top lane and make a huge play. You just have such great playmaking potential that having flashes, having the ability to teleport if you want to, all of these are super helpful. Guardian is nice on him, for sure. But, you know, one of the nice things about Guardian previously is it helped him through his kind of tough laning phase, but now he doesn't get it. It's just not as available as often. So that makes his laning phase a little bit tougher. And so having Unsealed Spellbook for more ignites, more flashes, more playmaking in the mid game, and just accepting he's going to have a tough laning phase, maybe put a couple more points in your queue just so you have more healing in lane. Could be helpful. So I think if you want it, you can try out Unsealed Biscuit, Footwear, Cosmic, Conditioning, Revitalize. Can all be good choices. Or you can go Second Wind instead of Revitalize. And both of these. If you want the more traditional build, especially if you think you're going to go Ardent Sensor, then you might want to consider Guardian, Fawn of Life, Conditioning, Revitalize, Footwear, Biscuit. And then you can go Ionian or Mobility. Ionian is very nice if you think you're going to get a Locket early, just to make sure you have more CDR, because CDR is very, very good on Rakan, because he has such high playmaking potential with his ult, and his E is very high impact as well, and it's on a pretty long cooldown. However, if you want to roam around and make more plays, and just have a larger presence on the map, then you can go Mobility Boot. So both are pretty legit. If you're going something like Redemption and Ardent Sensor, you're already going to have a decent chunk of CDR, so you might want to go Mobility. But if you're going to go something like Redemption and Locket, since Locket does not have CDR on it, then you might want to go Ionian. I think a lot of people go Ionian, but there's a decent split there. Let me see here. Yeah, there we go. So we've got Ionian, Mercs, Moby, Ionian, Ionian, Moby, Ionian. So Ionian kind of edges it out, but there's a pretty good diversity. That does reduce your summoner spells by an additional 10%. So you can get up to 40% summoner spell reduction if you go Ionian plus Unsealed Spellbook plus Cosmic Insight. You can get 40% summoners. That's a lot of flashes. That's a lot of ignites. That's pretty strong. That's pretty strong. So instead of a 5-minute flash, you're going to have like, a 2-minute flash. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty good. Alright, then we've got Alistar. Pretty good. The Aftershock nerf hurts him. How long are we looking here? Hour and 10. I'd like to get this done here in the next like 10 or 15 minutes or so. Pretty good. Like I said, he's basically a tankier version of Rakan. You do have a little bit more all-in burst in lane. Your WQ is a lot more reliable than Rakan's is without your ult. Rakan's with his ult is very reliable, but without the ult, they can dodge your W. And of course he is tankier, so he has a much better time dealing with CC. So, just because they have a Lux or a Malzahar or something like that on the enemy team, it's not going to completely ruin your day. Very good with mobility boots. Good with Unsealed Spellbook, so some people have been doing that with Alistar as well. Some people are still getting Aftershock on him. I would prefer to get the Unsealed Spellbook. And then Mobility Boots, and you just go your standard Equinox. Now, some people do like Righteous Glory on him a lot because he's such a great engaged champion. So Righteous Glory is pretty strong. That does give you some mana, too, because his combo can get pretty mana-intensive when you trade with that in lane. So having some extra mana there is good. And unlike Rakan, he doesn't have the option of going Redemption, so you do need some mana item there, and Righteous Glory is probably your best mana item option. So I think he's good. If you want Engage, but you're too afraid because they have too much CC, then you might want to consider going Alistar instead of Rakan. So if your team needs Engage, like nobody can start a fight, then, you might consider Alistar if they have a lot of CC. Now, Alistar is going to get outscaled by Braum, Tahm. Like, once his WQ is on cooldown, once he engages, he really can't do that much after that, right? Whereas, someone like Taric with his ult and his, like, persistent healing, or Braum with all of his chain stunning everybody and shields, there's going to have a lot more impact in a 5v5 team fight than Alistar is, outside of the first, 2 seconds when Alistar engages. So the Alistar engage, if it's good enough, and you blow somebody up, then that can be worth it. But if you just mildly injure some people and then Braum gets to throw up his shield and Kog'Maw turns on his W, you're going to lose that fight probably. But if you're just picking off that person in the side lane, or you're picking off that jungler who's trying to do the red buff alone at 40 minutes into the game or something like that, then Alistar is going to be a lot better at that type of thing than many of these other champions. Okay, Lulu is someone who has been making a bit of a comeback. We haven't seen her in pro play yet. You might see her next patch when they go to 8.2. Pretty good win rate. So the reason that Lulu's coming back, now I haven't seen a lot of Lulu, but I think it makes sense that she's becoming more popular again. She's very good with hyper carry champions like Twitch, Kog'Maw, Jinx, because she gives them a lot of extra attack speed. So anyone who benefits very heavily from attack speed is going to like Lulu a lot, especially those on-hit champions that run Hurricane. Because Lulu likes to get Ardent Sensor as well. She has really good synergy with Ardent Sensor because she has nice aggression early on with her E and her Q, and so getting that Amp Tome in the lane is very powerful for harassment, and then you can transition that really well into a good team fight later game item. So, now that we're going to be seeing a lot more Twitch, Kog'Maw, Jinx, things like that, especially after they nerfed Vayne and after they nerfed Ezreal, then that's going to make Lulu a lot better. Also, they got rid of the Targon meta so that AD carries aren't running Targon, so you can actually stick damage to them early on in the lane. So she's a good combination of early game harass plus late game scaling. So if you want something like Janna that's going to have more presence in the laning phase, then it's really good. She's also pretty good against like squishy assassin type of champions. So against like a Riven or I'm trying to think of anybody else. Pretty good against Rakan. Anybody where if you CC them, they're going to get blown up and killed. It's brutal. Echo, oh my god, she crushes Echo because then he can't use his ult to get back. Or like Tahm Kench even. Like, if Tahm Kench has a bunch of Greyskins stored up and you polymorph him, then it won't let him Greyskin. She's also good against invisible champions. That's kind of a little known fact that when you put your picks on somebody with your E, it actually reveals them. So she's really good against champions that rely on invisibility, like Kali. When she tries to hide in her little circle or whatever, if you have an E on her, she can't hide. Twitch can't run away. I mean, he can, but you'll see him if you have picks on him. So some of these, like Talon, some of these sneaky invisible champions, you still get to see them when you put your E on them. So that's kind of a little known fact about Lulu that makes her good in some of those matchups. So you have to be careful if the enemy has harass. So she's not great into things like Zyra in the laning phase, or I don't know if someone's playing like Xerath or something, or Sona. I mean, historically she has pretty bad matchup into Sona and Karma, but both of those champions aren't being played a ton right now at all, so that gives her more space. Now she does have a bit of a hard matchup into Nami as well early on, but she's great. If you have a hyper carry and you're against tanks, and you're just going to be allowed to just sit there and go off, you can have good harassment in the laning phase, and you can scale really well. So if you have, she's just classically good with Kog'Maw. If you ever have Kog'Maw and you can play Lulu at all, you should heavily consider Lulu. Just a very, very deadly combination. Or Twitch. But yeah, I think she's coming back. The nerf to Guardian and Aftershock don't affect her, so obviously that helps her. That some of her competition is getting nerfed, so that's good. Now, Aerie has been nerfed, but I still think that Aerie, Mana Flow, Celerity, Scorch, and then Biscuit and Footwear are where you want to be. Then Ionian, Watcher, Redemption, Ardent Sensor, Mikhail, and Locket are good. So, I think you have to go Ionian on her because she needs the CDR so much that W is like the entire backbone of her kit. Yeah, you really want Ionian. And I wouldn't go Spellbook on her. Like, Flash doesn't matter that much. I mean, you can, like, Flash Q or something, but your Flash isn't that impactful compared to someone like Alistar Flash Pulve, Flash Q, or, like, Rakan Flash Ult. Her Flash just doesn't matter as much as some of the others, so I think Unsealed Spellbook is not necessarily that great on her. I'd probably just stick with Aerie. It's good early game harass, and it's really good scaling for late game. And Mana Flow, all of these things are just classic, very good on her. Alright, Soraka is another one that I think is creeping up a little bit as tanks are coming back into the meta a little bit more. She has good lane harass. She's not very good against all-in champions, but these four really popular champions right now, none of them are great all-in champions. So if Soraka just gets to scale and do her thing, and you have tanks on your team, it's really hard for the enemy to kill you, especially if either they don't have a hyper carry, or if they do, then you also have a hyper carry. Then I think that Soraka's in a really good position. So if you're just sitting back healing that unkillable Malachi or Shin or Tahm, you wouldn't have a Tahm Kench on your team, like a Shyvana or something like that. She's very, very good. So, and she applies really good pressure early on. I mean, her Q plus auto attack harass, if you want to go Eye of the Watchers, is really strong. So she's not unconditionally always a good pick, but she is a good counter to a lot of these other like peeler tanks, especially Tahm Kench and Braum, that have very little scaling into the late game, especially if the enemy team doesn't have assassins. Now, she did get indirectly nerfed a little bit because they got rid of Ruby Sightstone, and that was something that was core if you wanted to go the Warmogs build, right? So the Warmogs build, you would just go Ruby Sightstone into Redemption into Warmogs around level 9 or 10, and that would give you pretty much like infinite sustain for long sieges and rotations. And that is really powerful, and it makes it very hard to all in and kill you. Now, one thing about Soraka that, you know, some people critique and say about Warmogs, they'll say, oh, well, her W is like it costs 1% of her max health, and so it's a bad idea to stack health because it's counterproductive. It's like, yeah, that's true. You know, if you have 10,000 health, it's costing you 300 health to heal somebody. But this, you know, or if you have 1,000 health, it's only costing you 100 health to heal somebody. But at the same time, like, you know, that mid laner is going to kill you a lot easier if you have 1,000 health versus if you have 3,000 health. And so having a large health pool, you don't get that so that it makes your W more efficient, because it doesn't. You get that because it makes it really difficult for the enemy to all in and assassinate you before your team can help you. Okay? So that's why you get it. Also, the healing is insane. Insane. So if you stay in the back untouched in a team fight, which can happen a lot if you have a good front line, then you can just heal people forever for a lot of health, because you're constantly going to be getting healed by Warmogs. Or if it's Clown Fiesta style in solo queue, which it always is, and you're just running around from fight to fight, then all of a sudden you're at full health. It's great. Or if you get poked out, like maybe you get hit by a couple of, Xerath queues, no problem. You know, usually that would end the siege because you would have to go back to base and heal, and the rest of your team would have to disperse. But now, because you have Warmogs, you can just chill for 5 seconds and be back at full health. So Warmogs, you don't always have to rush it on Soraka, but it is a useful tool for Soraka that's not available to other enchanters in a way that makes sense. So Soraka can be one of the more difficult, like, tankier enchanters out there. Obviously not more tanky than someone like Taric, but she can be respectable with that build. But now that that's gone off of Ruby, there are some, like, more strange permutations. So now you can go Guardian on her. You can still go Airy on her. You know, you can still go the standard, you know, Airy, Mana Flow, Celerity Scorch build. But if you go Guardian, you do have access to Font of Life, which is very nice later on with Ardent Censer. You have the Guardian keeps you safe against all-ins in lane and later on in the game, safer. You have Conditioning, which gives you some extra resistances. And Revitalize, obviously, is really, really good on her because you do a lot of the healing. And that gives you extra global pressure because it's going to give you 15% on your healing when you global ult somebody on the other side of the map. So I think that's a pretty good option. And now something else that's a little... So basically you're giving up Airy. You don't need the mana regen early. You're going to have Fairy Charms anyways. Her spells are super cheap. So Mana Flow Band is kind of... It's not worthless, but it's not necessary on her. Celerity is nice. 3% move speed's good. You can work around it. Scorch is okay, but it's been nerfed. You know, I just feel like this suite of abilities is really nice and shores up some of the weaknesses that Soraka has, which is early game all-in threat. And so this is going to keep you a lot safer. Now, you know, most of the time you'll go Watchers on Soraka. If you go Watchers, you're not going to be able to go Warmogs. So, and that's fine. You know, sometimes you can just go Eye of the Watchers and then just, you know, Redemption, Ardent Censer, Locket, and that'll be the end of it. And that's still a really powerful build. You're going to be squishy, though. So if they have Assassins, that could be a problem. Right? So if you pick Soraka, like, 3rd pick and then 4th and 5th pick, you know, they picked, like, you know, Zed mid lane and Kayn in the jungle or something. And you're just like, oh, crap. You know, I shouldn't have picked Soraka. You would have the option of going something like Ninja Tabi, and then I think you can go Eye of the Equinox. I know that sounds stupid on Soraka, but a remnant of the Aspect or whatever. I don't know why they changed it to Aspect instead of Equinox, but anyways. It does have a lot of early health regen, which is very good for sustain with Soraka, not only from taking trades, but also if you have to heal your AD carry, that helps you heal in addition to your Q. So that's really good. And then it gives you that coveted 500 health, which is going to make you a lot more tanky, and it's going to enable you to go Warmogs around level 10 or so if you want. So you could rush Remnant of the Aspect into Redemption into Warmogs if you wanted to, and that would give you that sort of Juggernaut Soraka build. So you don't have to be Juggernaut Soraka, but if they end up picking Assassins and you still wanted to pick Soraka, or you picked Soraka before they picked Assassins, that is an interesting alternate build that I think can work. Okay, so you don't always have to do it, but you can. And the reason this works is you can get 3 points in Q in lane, which is pretty standard for Soraka harassment, and that does a lot of damage to the back line, and that's still going to let you last hit minions with your spells and trigger the Remnant. Because your spells are so cheap and it's so easy to last hit with them. So, you can make this work. Although most of the time you will want to go Watchers. It's better harass. It just obviously makes more sense for a caster like Soraka. It's just if you go this, you're never going to be able to go Warmogs until like level 15 or 16. So it just depends on what the situation is. But that is on the table for Soraka. If you have to, you can go for that tankier build. Nami's another one who's coming back into vogue. She does have really good early game pressure, kind of like Lulu. She just doesn't scale as well as Lulu. She can put a slow on auto attacks, which is nice, but that's not the same as giving someone an extra, 50% attack speed and extra movement, like a ton of extra movement speed. So she's good. She just doesn't scale as well as either Soraka, Lulu, or Janna, which is why I have all of them higher. But she does have better kill threat in lane. If you land your bubble on people, there's a high probability that they're going to die. God, this cat hair is like killing me. There's a high probability they're going to die. It's just keep in mind that your wave is going to get completely wrecked by Braum. So don't ever pick Nami into Braum. And you need to make sure you're going to be able to stick her ass on them. Like, you do not want to pick her into champions like Soraka. Like, it's a pretty good pick into Lulu. But, I played a lot of Nami in Season 4. She was my most played champ. I had like 400 Nami games. So she can be really good. It's just, I still don't think it's an early game dominant meta. But if you want to play something that's early and you want kill threat, so if you have a Jhin, like she's pretty good with Jhin. She's pretty good with like Misfortune, Draven. Like, you want a kill threat lane that's also an enchanter, then Nami is a good option. Finally, Zyra. I have her on here as an AP champion. In theory, she is very good against tanks because she gets free harass and they can't all in and kill her in lane. The problem is, like, the runes. It's so difficult, like I said, to get through Biscuits, Second Wind, Targons, all of that stuff. They have so much sustain that it's just very hard to kill them. But if you can consistently stick harass on their AD carry, you can make them miss CS. And then late game in team fights, if you can really leverage that power spike when you get to Sorcerer Boots plus Haunting guys, because you're going to get it a lot faster these days than you used to be able to get it, then you can take over the game. But the higher the elo goes, the harder it's going to be to win with Zyra, because you're just not going to be able to stick harass. And once they get Locket, it's really hard to kill people anymore. So you get outscaled really hard once the enemy gets Locket, especially if they get Locket plus Redemption. It's pretty much over. But she can be really strong. She does have good harass in lane. And that's it. As far as like the amount of like in depth I'm going to talk about with some of these champions, I think an hour and a half is probably about enough. I do have the rest of them listed here. Thresh can be really good if you land your hooks consistently. He still has really good peel. He's just a great utility champion. I think that the nerf to Relic Shield hurts him a lot. He's not going to have nearly as much healing in lane. He's already pretty squishy. I think that in a lot of circumstances, he's going to get outscaled. He has a really hard time against Tahm Kench, especially, as this is his worst nightmare. But Taric is also really rough. Braum's rough. Alistar's rough. Okay matchup against Rakan. Okay matchup against Janna. There's just not a lot of great stuff here for Thresh. So He's all right, but I would not play him unless you're a one-trick Thresh and you're just really, really good on him. Yeah, he's just in kind of a rough spot. Same thing with Blitzcrank. Like, Blitzcrank has a bit less utility, but he is really good at hooking and killing people. The only problem is tanks are extremely popular right now, and those hooks on some of these tanks, you don't want to be pulling Braum into your team, or like Taric. I guess you can, but you know, I feel like they're just going to be better choices than that most of the time. Brandon's another one who's been hot for a little bit. You know, he did get a rework. He does do more damage, but he just doesn't have as much consistent harass as Zyra. And kind of similar to Zyra, there's a lot of counterplay to him. Once people get Locket, it's hard to stick harass in lane. Once people get Locket and Redemption, it's pretty much lights out. Braum absorbs his entire ult, so Braum counters him really hard. I don't. If Tahm Kench eats someone who's about to explode, I think they still die. But, you know, if you stun somebody and you're trying to get that third hit on them, Braum can eat them before you get that third hit. So, you know, Tahm and Braum are pretty tough matchups. Taric and Janna, if you can bully them early, maybe you win. But, like, once they get that Redemption and Locket, it's pretty much going to be lights out. So, yeah, he's alright. He's not that amazing. Morgana's okay, you know, but Tahm Kench crushes her. Braum's pretty good against her. I just think she has a really tough matchup here. She's kind of like a hook champion. Like, she doesn't actually hook, but you want to CC squishy champions and let your team pick them off. And just very few of these champions fit that bill. Like, yeah, if you hit Janna or Lulu and they don't have a Mikhail's, then you could kill them, but it's just not a lot of good targets here. Leona has fallen off a lot after Aftershock. Like, you can still make her work in Bronze and Silver if people are always out of position and you want to punish that to the max. She's still one of the best champions at doing that. You know, it's possible you could run like an Unsealed Spellbook on her and roam a lot with like Teleport. People are still taking Aftershock. I mean, she's okay. I just feel like the meta has changed a lot, and it's just, like, these engaged champions just get countered so hard by Tahm and Braum and the crew, Taric, Janna, that it just makes it really hard to be an engaged tank in the bot lane these days. Sona did get a buff on this patch, which is nice, but she still got nerfed like 11 or 12 times. I talked about it in my most recent coaching session, you know, and that's just going to make it very difficult to play her right now. Like, she can, in theory, step up and scale about as hard as some of these other champions. I haven't done the full numbers on her W since the nerf, but it's going to take you a bit more time to ramp up, and you're very, very squishy. You're very susceptible to all-in kills. You know, if Tahm Kench hits you with one Tongue Lash and he's running Glacial Augment, you have to flash or you're dead. You know, if Braum hits you with a Q, you probably have to flash or you're dead. You know, so it's just really tough for all-ins. If Rakan, like, ult W's you and you don't ult fast enough, then you're dead. So I think she's just a bit too squishy without enough payoff for my taste right now. But she can be good. Bard is always interesting. He's fun. He has good early game harass. He just has very, very low scaling. You know, his R and his E have no scaling whatsoever. His W and his Q have very limited scaling. I guess his Q has like a 0.7 on it, but... or 0.6, I don't remember. He's okay. I mean, if you roam a lot and you convert those roams into kills, like, he can have a really high impact. I think Unsealed Spellbook might be okay, but you don't really gain a lot out of your flashes. Like, yeah, you can maybe flash stun if someone's next to a wall, but it's not as powerful as like a flash pulverize from Alistar or a flash ult from Rakan. So you know, you can take Unsealed, but it's not as impactful as those other choices. You do have some early game harass, but you just fall off late game. Like, you can make good plays, but I don't know. If you're really good with Bard and you're, like, just a great one trick, you can definitely make him work. I just think that you're working a lot harder than you have to work with other champions to get similar or better results. So I think you're, in theory, just strictly from an analytical perspective, I think you're handicapping yourself by picking Bard. But from a fun perspective, you know, you can always have a good time with him. and you definitely can win some games. What are people doing with it? You don't see a lot of him in like Challenger, and definitely not in Pro Play, but people are kind of all over the place. Got Comet, Electrocute, Frozen Augment, Unsealed Spellbook. A lot of people like to go Remnant, just kind of a standard Remnant Redemption Locket build. With Moby Boots, obviously, so you can go get your meeps. A lot of people do like Mikhail's auto. Yeah, people are all over the place in terms of runes. I don't know. I mean, you get more harassment out of something like Comet. I think I would probably prefer Comet to Electrocute. But Unsealed Spellbook does have some potential with him. It does give you more ignites for kill pressure. You have the perfect timing troll where you can like ult yourself and then perfect timing yourself. It just really annoy people. He's okay. He can win. He's an early game bully who has really good roaming potential that has really mediocre scaling later into the game. Unless you collect like every single meep that spawns on the map. So he's all right. If you have fun, you could definitely win with him, but I wouldn't recommend him for the vast majority of the population. Shin is okay. The problem is his damage got nerfed directly. I think he's a lot better top lane now after Ornn got nerfed, but as far as support, they just nerfed Aftershock. They nerfed his health. I guess he usually gets inspiration anyways as a secondary tree. But he's just in a bad spot. Like, just like other tanks, you just can't stick enough damage in trades to kill people right now, especially when Aftershock does far, far less damage than it used to. It just makes it really hard, and you just get outscaled most of the time. Vel'Koz. Now, Vel'Koz, I really only pick in a very specific matchups. He seems kind of weird to put in a tier 3, but I like him specifically into Zyra or Brand or other AP supports because he outranges them, he outdamages them to some extent, he has better matchups against tanks. He's just a really good pick into Zyra, so he's kind of my pocket pick into Zyra if I feel like getting a little spicy. So he does true damage, he has good poke, he has good itemization, pretty good champion against that one matchup. I mean, he's good against Brand as well, but if they have any sort of engage, he's going to get like murdered by the tanks probably. If they have any sort of engage, he's going to be in a really bad place. You want to make sure that, they have these relatively immobile, like non-engaged type of poke champions, and he's just the king of that. Okay, Karma is another one who people were really toying around with her earlier in the season with things like Ultimate Hat and stuff, stuff like that. But I think that ultimately she's just been nerfed too many times. Early game harass is just not that great, as I've explained before. I think if you just want to play Karma, if you want early game harass out of an enchanter, you should just play Lulu. Lulu just scales much, much better into the late game with her W, and she has more flexibility. Like, she's way better against assassins as well. So, I just don't think it's Karma's meta. I think she needs either a partial rework, especially on her W, to give her some kind of real CC, or just some numbers tweaking there. Just something. I feel like she's not, like, ridiculously bad. Like, you can still win with her, you can still play with her. I just feel like she needs a little bit of help in the current meta. So, it would be nice if they added something that was, like, just sort of, like, strictly defensive, like, boost, heal, and shield a little bit more. Instead of Aerie. Because they had to nerf Aerie's offense. I don't know. Maybe they could nerf, or, like, buff Aerie's, like, the amount that she shields somebody. I don't know. I think it's Karma specific. I just feel like her numbers are a bit too low right now. Okay, and that's going to be it. Like, niche picks that are also, that I get asked about, like, you can win with, that are, like, kind of like one trick or sort of specialist champions would be, like, Sion, Zillion, Veigar, Lux, Poppy. Xerath has fallen off a lot. Teemo, Gragas, stuff like that. So I put them down here. You can win with them. People ask about them sometimes, but in general, I'm not going to recommend them to the general population. And then here are just some of the like super obscure picks that occasionally might win a game, but that I also don't recommend. Okay, and that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.